I'm Professor Alexa Chu, and I teach at the University of North Carolina School of Law.
And I'm Professor Rachel Gurvich, also from the UNC School of Law. This video will cover the basics of how to cite reported judicial opinions in practical legal documents. That means we'll go over the basics of both full citations and short form citations, but we won't cover many of the fancy or highly specialized rules for case names, which is the topic of episode 5. And we'll link that to the video description once it's recorded. Also in the video description, you'll find a link to the handout that we'll be showing you on our screen today.
So for this basics video, the first question to ask is whether this is the first time that you are citing this reported opinion. So here is our handout. And is this the first time you're citing an opinion? If it is, then you want to write a full citation to the opinion. And I'm going to talk through how to write a full citation. If the answer is no, then you're going to want to write a short citation. And Rachel is going to talk through the decision process for writing a short citation. All right, so here we are. And yes, this is the first time you're citing an opinion. And so you need a full cite. As we talked about in the last video, a full cite includes the name of the case, the reporter information, the pin cite, and a parenthetical with the court and year. And so this here, you can see this is basically what it looks like. All right, so let's figure out the case name. Remember from episode 2 that no matter how many parties are listed, you only want to use the first party listed on each side of the V. So do this process first on one side of the V and then on the other side. So now we ask who the first party is. Does the first party seem to be an actual human person, like not a company, but a person like Rachel Gurvich? If so, write the last name of that first person who's listed. If it says et al., which means and others, just ignore it. If the person isn't an actual human person, does the party seem to be a business entity? If so, then write the whole name of the business. Or does the party seem to be a geographic unit, like the United States or the Commonwealth of Virginia or the city of Detroit? If so, write the whole name. All right, so the case name. So now what about extra information about the party? So this might be AKA, which is also known as, or a DBA, doing business as, or a description of somebody's role in the case, like an administrator, appellee. If you have any of that extra information, delete it. So now look at what you have left. Does either name begin with the? If so, delete the first word, which is the. And then does either name have an and in it? If like the word and. If so, replace it with the symbol ampersand, which is this. All right, so now we have finished our case name. Let's end that clause with a comma and move on to the reporter information. So here we are, reporter information is the volume number, reporter, abbreviation, first page, a comma, and then the pin cite. So we're going to start with the volume number for the reporter. This will just be a number. Presumably you've already figured out what reporter you're using. And so the next thing is you'll need to figure out the abbreviation for that reporter title. To find your abbreviation for a state reporter, you want to look in the Bluebook in table 1.3, which I'm not very effectively showing, but maybe you'll remember it anyway. And so table 1.3 has an entry for every state and the District of Columbia. The next table, table T 1.4, has entries for tribal nations and US territories. So for federal reporters, you are if you're citing to modern cases, then there are just a few options. For the Supreme Court, there is the US reporter. For the federal circuit courts, it's the federal reporter, which is FDOT. And for federal district courts, it's the FSUP. And these will be series as well, like FSUP second, FSUP third, etc. All right, so for then you want to put in the page where the opinion starts. So now it is pin cite time. This is the most exciting time when giving reporter information. So you want to write another comma and then the pin cite. So remember that a pin cite is the page of the opinion where the words that you're using, that you're citing to, where those words appear. And in legal citation, remember, we are kind to our readers and we tell them which page in an authority has the information you're citing to. And people often ask me, hey, when do I need to pin cite? And the answer is you need a pin cite whenever you're referring to information in a case. If you're just referring to the case's existence, you don't need one, but that's rare in practical legal writing. And if you want to pin cite multiple pages, you can. So, and yes, pin cite can be both a noun and a verb. So to pin cite multiple pages that are consecutive, you use a dash. So this is pages 11 through 13. If you want to do pages that are not right next to each other, but are like more than one page, you can also do that. So this is like pages 6 and 9, and then also 11 through 13. That's information that's scattered across a lot of pages in this hypothetical opinion. All right. So now we have written our case name, our reporter information, including the pin cite. And now it is time for, oops, not to do that. To do this, to write the parenthetical with the court and the year. So first, you want to write the abbreviation of the court that issued the opinion, and then second, the date the opinion was issued. So the date part is pretty straightforward, but let's spend a moment on court abbreviations. So for state courts, you want to go to the state entry in table 1.3 in the Bluebook. That's the same one that I mentioned when we were looking for reporter abbreviations for different states. So in T1.3, once you find your state's entry, you can find the name of that court that issued the opinion, and it should be in bold. So then use the abbreviation in parentheses next to that bolded name. That is the abbreviation for the court. For federal cases, oh, wait, hold on, there's an exception for, sorry, here at the bottom here. If the reporter abbreviation already tells the reader which court decided the opinion, then don't write the court abbreviation. If you do happen to do that, it's fine. So for federal cases other than the Supreme Court, you are going to write out an abbreviation for the circuit or the district court. So for circuit courts, the abbreviation for circuit is CIR period or SIR. And then before that, you'll give the abbreviation for which circuit court it is, right? If it's a numbered one, it's one of these ordinals, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th. If it's the DC circuit, it's DC. If it's the federal circuit, it's Fed dot. For district court abbreviations, they all start with a D. D is for district. And then after that, there will be some sort of state abbreviation, right? That's the state that the district is in. So for the district courts, there can also be multiple district courts in each state. And so when that happens, they get these kind of like geographic labels, directional labels, right? So you've got central district, middle district, northern district, southern district, eastern district, western district. And I think that's all of the ones that there are. So this little chart here can tell you those abbreviations. So then to add the state abbreviation at the end, you want to look at table T10 in the Bluebook. And table T10 has all of the abbreviations for the states, the Bluebook abbreviations for the states. They are not all the same as the US Postal Code abbreviations. Why? I don't know. Will terrible things happen to you if you use a postal code abbreviation instead of the Bluebook abbreviation? I certainly hope not. If you are thinking about doing something terrible to somebody who has made that mistake, maybe don't. All right, so now the full cite to your reported case is written. Yay. Can you do more to make the citation even more Bluebook perfect? If your case name involves a business entity or a geographic location, the answer is probably. But as Rachel mentioned, we will cover fancifying your case names in a different episode. So for the rest of this episode, Rachel will explain when and how to write short cites to reported cases.
So let's talk about short cites. And most of the information that we're going to go over here is in Rule B 10.2 in the Bluebook, or on pages 16 to 17 if you have the hard copy of the 21st edition. So let's imagine that we are all the way back at the beginning of our decision tree. So our first question was, is this the first time you're citing the opinion? Alexa talked about what to do if the answer is yes. But if the answer is no, then you can use a short citation. There are some very persnickety rules in various places of the Bluebook, imagine that, suggesting that if it's been a while since you last cited that particular case in your document, maybe you should use the full citation again. But if you're in our 1L legal writing classes, you can ignore those rules. Instead, for RAWA, if you write a full citation to a case a single time anywhere in your document, then you can use a short citation every subsequent time. Okay, so when you're doing a short cite, the first decision you have to make is whether you can use id or not. So that's ID period. Id is the abbreviation of the Latin word idem, which means the same. So in this context, id just means the source that I just cited. So let's say that I write a rule and cite the case Chu v. Gervich. Then the next sentence, I write another rule and want to cite the same case. Instead of writing out Chu v. Gervich with some reporter information, I can just write id. Page 11 of the Blue Book has more information about when it's appropriate to use id and how to use id and capitalize. But in terms of capitalization, you treat the I in id like any other word in a sentence. So it's capitalized when it starts the sentence and lowercase when it doesn't, like when it follows a signal. Okay, so then the question to ask yourself to know whether you can use id is, are you citing a single authority that was also the only authority cited in the immediately preceding citation? If so, then use id. All right, so we know we can use id. Now we have to ask ourselves, has the pin cite changed from the immediately preceding citation? If it hasn't, you can just write id or id with a capital I, depending on whether it's the first word in a sentence, and you're done. Hooray! But if the page number has changed from the last citation, include the pin cite. So for example, id at new page number. You don't need brackets, you would just include the actual number there, right? So id at 145, and that's the citation, okay? And then once you've written the new page number, you're done. Okay, now what if it's not appropriate to use id? So here we have the pretty part of the handout with color coding. Okay, so then we know we can't use id because it's not the single case I just cited in the immediately preceding citation. And so then we have to ask ourselves, okay, I know I can use a short form, I can't use id. So the question then is, do I mention the case name in the sentence preceding the citation, right? So let's say I'm writing a rule illustration and this sentence comes up, right? For example, in Higgins, the North Carolina Supreme Court held XYZ. Well, so I've just told my reader that the case I'm relying on is Higgins. So I don't really need to include Higgins in the citation because then it would just be redundant. Again, will terrible things happen if you do? We sure hope not. But if you don't have to, if you've already included Higgins in the sentence, then just include the reporter volume number, the reporter abbreviation, and at pin in your short form citation. So here's an example. This is the example that's also given in the Blue Book rule, right? So 162 is the volume number, NE is the abbreviation, and 100 is the pin cite, right? Notice in short form citations, we don't need the initial page number where the opinion begins, and we also don't need that court date parenthetical that Alexa talked about, okay? But if my sentence does not itself include the name of the case, then I include this same information preceded by party name and a comma, right? So Paul's graph, which is a case you will likely read in your first year of law school if you have not done so yet. This is also the Blue Book example, Paul's graph, comma, and then the material we talked about above. Now, it has to be a party name, but which party's name? Okay, so use the first party, right? The party that you come to before the V, unless the first party is a common litigant, like a government entity, right? State or North Carolina. So to understand why that rule exists, let's think about two hypothetical criminal cases. So remember that in criminal cases, the government or the people or the state or the Commonwealth is the prosecution, right? And so then we could have two hypothetical cases, right? State versus Gervich and state versus Chu. There, to sort of have it make the most sense to my reader, in my short form, I'd want to use Gervich or Chu instead of state, because otherwise all the citations in the brief would be state and state and state in their short forms, and that could get jumbly, which is a very technical legal writing word. And then finally, you may also choose to shorten a long party name, so long as the reference is unambiguous, right? So the Blue Book example, it gives you First National Trust and Investment Corporation, which you would put in with abbreviations, as we'll talk about in the full citation. But in a short citation, it's totally fine to just do First National, right? We'll know it's just giving your reader some signal. Hey, this is that First National case that I did a full cite for before. And then the last thing to mention is that this form, case name at PIN, is not a Bluebook compliant short form citation. So we see this a lot in our first year legal writing courses because you're allowed to do, for example, id at 100. So a lot of students think it would make great sense to just do Paul's graph at 100. In fact, however, that's not an acceptable Bluebook short citation. Instead, we need to include the reporter information that we had above, right? So it would be just like here, right? This is the right way, and this way is not Bluebook compliant. And that is the end of our episode on how to cite a reported case. Stay tuned for more.